Well, I think we'll start the webinar now. We said we'd start at 1 o'clock till 2, so people's time is valuable. First of all, to get us going, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional inhabitants of the land we're meeting on today, the Aboriginal people, their spirits and ancestors. We acknowledge the vital contribution that Indigenous peoples and cultures have made and still make to the nation we share, Australia. So my name is Norma Shanky-Williams. I head up the strategic planning team here at Willoughby Council. And joining us this afternoon, we have 4 councillors, Councillor Wendy Norton, Lynn Saville, Christine Tuan and Craig Campbell. And also here I have support from Tanya Stark, our engagement specialist here at Council, and Ian Arnott, the planning manager, and some members of the planning team, including Jane Hosey, who's done a lot of work on this strategy in particular. We have about 28 people registered for the webinar this afternoon, and I have a couple or 3 questions that have already been submitted that I'll respond to at the end of the presentation. So I have a slide deck ready to present. It'll take about 30 minutes, and then Tanya and Jane, I hope, will help me to talk to the questions and relay some of the questions that have been sent during the webinar. And if you have a question during the webinar, if you could send those questions to chat, and then we will draw them together in a bit of a table so I can easily see who's been asking what and give you a response as best we can. After that, the webinar will go on the website after the presentation today, so you can see it at a later point and view it at your leisure, should you so wish to do so. So I'll now move on to share the screen with you so you can see the presentation that we've got for you today. Can everybody see that presentation and where to enter the questions you've got this afternoon?
No, I can't see a presentation.
Let me just see if I can.
Now I can.
Oh, good. I think I didn't share it properly. There we are. It's all baby steps with webinars for us, isn't it? But we'll get better as we go along. So the reason we're meeting this afternoon, or we're meeting in this way through the webinar, is to talk about the draft industrial land strategy for Willoughby Industrial Lands. Today's webinar will be particularly focused on Artarmon. The agenda today will give you a little bit of background and context to the industrial lands in Willoughby, talk about some of the feedback we've received to date, and talk about some general principles for all the Willoughby industrial lands that we would like to apply in a final strategy at which time we'll be able to move forward with our LEP. But the focus today, as I say, after we've talked in general terms, will be on the Artarmon industrial area. So for those of you who are not aware of the geography of our industrial lands, you can see here we have the Artarmon industrial area in the south of the local government area, Chatswood East in the north, and Lane Cove North in the west of the LGA. Today we'll focus on Artarmon, but next week we'll have a separate webinar on the other 2 industrial areas and be able to focus on them. As a bit of background for those who may not be aware, we're working under the strategic framework of the state government, in particular the Greater Sydney Commission in the metropolitan area, who issued the region plan in 2018, and the North District plan that we work under more specifically, as Willoughby sits within the North District, also in 2018. Last year, we worked on our local strategic planning statement, which sets the direction for the next 20 years in terms of strategic planning, vision and direction for Willoughby, and this was signed off in 2020. And that included work we've done on the strategic work in Chatswood CBD, our local centres and our housing position paper, and the industrial lands. So the LSPS, as we call it, the local strategic planning statement, does include references to industrial lands and does include the intention to issue a draft and ultimately a final industrial land strategy. So we're following through on that strategic framework that we've had set out since really 2016, 2017. In terms of what those state government plans tell us and advise us and guide us to do, The Metropolis of Three Cities, which is the region plan for the whole of metropolitan Sydney, talks about industrial and urban services land to be planned, protected and managed as an important resource for the whole city. The North District Plan sets out planning priorities for industrial lands and urban services lands for the retention and management, for the growth and investment in health and education precincts. And we, of course, have a very important health and education precinct in the south of the LGA around St Leonards. The Eastern Economic Corridor should be better connected and competitive. This corridor is the very important jobs-rich area that runs from the port and the airport through the city of Sydney and right up through to Macquarie Park and beyond now, arguably, as our Eastern Economic Corridor, and we in Willoughby sit within that corridor, a very important jobs-generating part of the metropolitan area, and supporting growth of targeted industry sectors. And for different industrial lands, they may be different industry sectors that we'll be looking to target. Also in 2018, but a little bit later, we had the issue of the draft plan for St Leonards Crow's Nest, which is a planned precinct, one of the 30 or so planned precincts across metropolitan Sydney. This one relates to the intended new metro station at Crow's Nest and the growth that will be encouraged around that new metro station up into the strategic centre of St Leonards itself. It talks about 16,500 new jobs in this particular precinct over the next 20 years in a wide range of sectors and industries. It has a vision for the whole of this planned precinct area, and part of that is to retain the existing zoning in the Artarmon Industrial area, with an intensification of uses in the light industrial area, including high-tech and health-related uses, which are currently promoted in the industrial area through the current LEP anyway. Other council plans and documents that give a bit of framework and background to this industrial land strategy is our CSP, our Community Strategic Plan, also issued in 2018, and sets community priorities to facilitate the development of all businesses and diversify our economy, including creative and innovative industries. Our LSPS that I've referred to already, which was signed off, assured in fact by the GSC in March this year, talks about protecting the role of Willoughby's industrial lands as important urban service hubs for the lower North Shore, and supporting St Leonards to develop as a commercial precinct in its strategic centre status, being adjacent to the health and education hub, which is focused on the Royal North Shore Hospital to the south of the Artarmon industrial area. Our own industrial lands position statement came out in 2017, so before the state had put out its final versions of the district plan and the region plan. And that was talking about setting principles for industrial lands in Willoughby to ensure we have a sufficient supply of such land for the next 20 years, which is an important planning principle, and to recognise the importance of these lands to fulfil the city's urban services needs. They are seen as a very important generator of local, diverse and skilled jobs, and provide that very important go-to place for the urban services that support a sustainable city. Our Green City Plan, which was issued last year of 2019, relevantly talks about expanding council's electric vehicle fleet and expanding the community EV charging network. So we are talking about electric vehicle charging stations in our Green City Plan, which is something we'd like to see distributed throughout the industrial area too. So I'm drawing on those other plans that Willoughby Council has issued and deciding that these in fact are plans that we have to take into account in going forward with our industrial lands strategy. Other reports that we think are relevant to this industrial strategy are the work we had done by SGS Economics and Planning, who advised that there is in fact insufficient zoned land available in Sydney's North District to accommodate urban services jobs. And SGS discussed the need in fact to provide for as much as 2,000 additional industrial and urban service jobs by 2031. And that the share of that is roughly 1,600 in Artarmon and roughly 400 in East Chatswood. Now, we know that industrial lands in this part of Sydney are quite expensive. The land values of the industrial areas are around double elsewhere in Sydney. We know that. This is very expensive real estate that we're sitting on here. And the rents are around 50% higher. However, the job densities that you get in our industrial lands area are generally 3 times the average of the Sydney region. So they're important for that job generating, job density delivery. The Employment Lands Development Monitor, which was formerly the Employment Lands Development Plan, ELDP, that was issued on a quarterly basis by DPIE, and now issues reports on demand and supply of industrial lands in Sydney and the Central Coast, also confirms the importance of industrial lands in the North District, reflecting that the North District has the lowest supply of such lands in Sydney, and yet the highest number of jobs per hectare. So there are other clues, there are other pieces of evidence and other supporting reports that we can rely upon in terms of going forward with our industrial lands planning. In terms of a metropolis, the metropolis of that works, which is a report that was done by the GSC in October 2018. This was a thought piece, so it wasn't actually a report that contributed directly to the district planning work, but it advised those working across local government in particular about the importance of industrial and urban services land. So we've relied on a metropolis that works, this thought piece, this report, in some of the work we've done on our industrial lands. Cities are more than their residential neighborhoods. We know, we understand that. It confirms the crucial role that industrial and urban service lands play in the day-to-day function of a sustainable city, and warns that relinquishing these lands in the face of short-term imperatives is likely to be costly in the long term. Once you've lost them, you never get them back. They've moved to a higher value use, and that's where they will remain in perpetuity. It also affirms that sufficient industrial land with access to markets and users across the whole metropolitan area is integral to delivering the vision of the 30-minute city, where we can all access jobs, education and services easily from homes across the city. So industrial land is needed everywhere. It's not a matter of just consigning it to Western Sydney and saying that's where our industrial land is for Sydney. We need it in every part of the metropolitan area to serve its purpose for all residents in metropolitan Sydney. Just a quick reflection on industry and manufacturing post-COVID. This is really reflecting on some of the commentary that we've been reading about the need to have a more self-sustaining industry sector in Australia. Arguably, these industrial and urban services lands will be more important as we re-examine our industrial and productive base following COVID-19 and become more self-reliant. The benefits have been recognized of having goods manufactured locally, because we've seen global supply chains break down, borders closing, and inability to get the things we need. And that has really shone a light on the need to perhaps build up and re-establish our industrial and productive base in Australia generally. So the Grattan Institute has made a comment, as you can see on this particular slide, and Ernst & Young Asia Pacific have also made a comment that this may be an opportunity for a rethink in the way we develop our manufacturing strategy for Sydney. So our lands in Willoughby will also play an important part in the extra attention being given to industry and manufacturing post-COVID, we believe, and they have to be there if they're going to benefit from that new thinking. In terms of consultation we've done to date, we had our industrial lands position paper out in 2017, as I've said. We held discussion forums in the old days, in the old way, on site in the industrial areas with rooms full of people, which sadly has not been able to be undertaken this time. And we had conducted online surveys and the normal engagement processes. In 2019, last year, we had our draft local strategic planning statement, our LSPS, on exhibition. And that, as it was talking about all our strategic work across Willoughby Council, it included priorities to protect the role of our industrial lands as urban service hubs for the lower North Shore. And the LSPS finally was assured by the GSC, and the agreed priorities were embedded within it relating to industrial lands just in March. So we rely on the LSPS to guide us in terms of changes to our LEP, both coming up in terms of council initiated changes and any changes that may be put forward by external and private proponents. A bit of a snapshot then on feedback that we've heard thus far prior to the issue of this draft strategy, both in terms of the industrial lands position statement and the LSPS. There has been general support for the protection of Willoughby's industrial lands, of which we have about 94 hectares across the local government area, a support for urban services in particular, a desire from some to increase the floor space ratio, the amount of development you can get on a site, support for a wider variety of industrial uses and diversity of employment opportunities was asked for. And sometimes I think it may be that the existing diversity and a variety of industrial uses that are allowed even currently under the LEP may be not fully understood. But that being said, we've explored the possibility of maybe diversifying employment opportunities in the future, closing some down, opening some up, looking to see how we can support new markets and new innovation, new technology. The management of a number of bulky goods outlets has been raised as something we should be careful about. Bulky goods outlets are not necessarily the answer for all sites in our industrial area, and we have some across both of the major industrial areas currently. There is also a desire to see improvements in streetscape, and traffic and parking improvements comes with every engagement process that we run. Traffic and parking are always the issue raised at some point in feedback. So we've listened to what's been said in setting our strategic directions for our industrial lands. So those strategic directions reinforce what we've been advised from the state government and the GSC to protect, retain and manage our industrial lands, particularly these valuable and finite areas in the North District, in Artarmon and East Chatswood. To manage and improve traffic and freight movement. Clearly, particularly Artarmon is in an excellent location for freight deliveries, freight movements throughout the network of transport in metropolitan Sydney. But of course, there is always a need to try and improve the access for freight and traffic generally. To promote and provide land uses that respond to changing technologies and market requirements, we have to be aware of what is changing. We don't want to set these lands in aspic. We do want to see them respond to the need to be nimble in terms of technological change and market requirements. We want to capitalize on existing road, rail and technology infrastructure, support and promote different business clusters where they arise, and encourage and incentivize sustainable and technological initiatives. So general initiatives for all of our industrial areas in Willoughby would be in reflecting on that desire to see additional floor space ratio, FSR, in some parts of the industrial areas to give them a little bit more opportunity for redevelopment and growth. From a 1.5 FSR in sites over 1,000 square meters in IN2 zones, we're suggesting we raise that to a 2-to-1 FSR to give a little bit of extra wriggle room, if you like, for those larger sites in our IN2 zones. We're actually looking to see whether or not the prohibition of childcare centres would be embraced by the community through this draft strategy. Really what we're looking for in industrial areas are urban services that find it very difficult to locate anywhere else, in a sense are not very good neighbours to have in commercial or residential areas. Childcare centres, we believe, may be not appropriate for industrial areas in terms of children's health and well-being, and should probably look to other locations for any new centres that would be opening. We want to incentivize energy efficiency and smart technology so that we can use technology throughout our industrial areas so that they operate with more efficiency and more generally more sustainable in their approach, and improve amenity, including increased tree canopy, which you may not think would be an important issue in an industrial area. But clearly we're trying to rectify the heat island effect as the climate changes and heats, and therefore tree canopy cover even in our industrial areas is an important new initiative, we believe, for the benefit and well-being of those who work and visit the industrial area. Improvement to road transport infrastructure is something that we will be also looking to deliver through not only the draft industrial lands strategy or the final when it's made, but our integrated transport strategy, which is also in the wings and being ready to finalize, having been on exhibition earlier this year. So I'll focus now on the Artarmon industrial area in particular in this second part of the presentation. It's about 1:20, so maybe there'll be about 10 minutes of slides from here on in, and then we'll open up to some questions. I'll deal with the questions that we already had before the webinar first, and then I'll see if there have been any others come in subsequent to that during the webinar itself. So looking at the Artarmon industrial area, it dates way back to the 1880s when it was focused on brick making to service the growth in residential development that was occurring through the advent of the rail network. It was used as a brickworks for a long time, and by the time of the County of Cumberland Plan in the 1950s, it was zoned an industrial area. It's approximately 64 hectares. It's a very strategically well-located piece of industrial land close to the metropolitan arterial road network and the major freight transport infrastructure such as the Pacific Highway, the Lane Cove Tunnel and the Gore Hill Freeway. So it's a really great location, close to the city and close to other areas of growth, particularly, as I say, in this North District on the lower North Shore. It's walking distance to St Leonards rail station, with that northern part of the Artarmon area, the Artarmon industrial area, close to the Artarmon local shopping centre and the station there. It's also close in the south to St Leonards Strategic Centre and the planned new Crow's Nest metro station down in North Sydney Council, slightly to the east down the Pacific Highway. It also sits to the north and adjacent to the Royal North Shore Hospital, which gives an opportunity to foster those synergies between the industrial area and this burgeoning new health and education precinct. So this gives you an idea of the zoning, the current zoning of the industrial area. We have little outcrops here of George Place in the north, and some of our IN2 land is separated over here in the west and down here again in the west, or to the east around Herbert Street. But most of the Artarmon industrial area is this dark IN1 industrially zoned land. Here's the Royal North Shore Hospital, and here is Gore Hill Oval for those who want to orient themselves on the map. I talked before about the St Leonards Crow's Nest plan, which has been in draft since last year, and we understand is about to be finalised this year by the Department of Planning. It talks about a health and education precinct and aims to deliver approximately 16,500 new jobs across the precinct over the next 20 years. But it does identify the Artarmon industrial area as accommodating an abundance of employment opportunities into the future, while also talking about retaining the existing zoning, industrial zoning for the industrial area. It still reflects on the possibility of intensifying the uses of the light industrial area, including high technology and ancillary health uses. So we are at this very close confluence, if you like, of a new health and education precinct from the Royal North Shore Hospital spreading north, and the industrial area for Artarmon right adjacent to that, that Royal North Shore Hospital, where the new precinct, the health and education precinct, is being expected by the state government. In our LSPS, we've stated that we will consider health and education uses on suitable sites that are zoned industrial at the moment on a case-by-case basis in close proximity to the health and education precinct, but while retaining that underlying industrial zoning as we're required to do through the strategic direction of the state. But we recognize that this is a very important area if we are indeed to grow the health and education uses that we will need, the services that we will need as the population grows, as the whole of St Leonard's Crow's Nest increases in terms of both residential and employment population with the new metro station. So in our LSPS, we looked at the possibility of where we could accommodate health and education uses close to the Royal North Shore Hospital and the TAFE, and we have identified an area on Frederick Street, Reserve Road, where we think that on a site-by-site basis, we could consider the possibility of particularly health uses that would support population growth and the operation of the Royal North Shore Hospital. So this is something that has been included in our LSPS, but we are examining and prosecuting through the draft Industrial Land Strategy now. So our key directions for Artarmon, we're coming up for 1:30 now, is to protect the essential industrial activities in Artarmon. There is no question it's an important area in terms of employment, in terms of urban services. It's well used by the City of Sydney and other councils to the east in the central and eastern city. The central city, of course, is Parramatta. The eastern city is focused on the City of Sydney. So these areas all turn to areas like Artarmon for their urban service needs. The retention of the IN1 and IN2 zones to protect those existing uses while still facilitating new technologies and future trends. So we're not holding back. We want things to prosper and be a good location for new technology in the future, as it indeed is in terms of location. So we're suggesting an increase in the floor space ratios throughout the IN2 area on sites that are larger sites of 1,000 square meters or more, from a current 1.5 to 1 to 2 to 1, to give that extra opportunity for redevelopment and growth. We will continue to support the intensification of employment uses in the IN2 industrial area close to the station, including high technology and ancillary health uses on a case-by-case basis. And there is already interest in developing some sites north of the Royal North Shore Hospital. Some have actually been approved as private hospitals on industrial land, and there is continuing interest that we look at new sites for that purpose too. So we're being open-minded about what can be done to accommodate those particular developments where they will genuinely add to the health and education and respond to the health and education needs of a growing city. We'll continue to prohibit residential uses in the Artarmon Industrial Precinct. Residential uses are inappropriate in an industrial area. They inhibit the operation of that industrial area, and they are more suitable in other industrial, in residential or business zones. We'll continue to limit bulky goods, those large retail formats, to the existing defined precinct, we would say. That's in the central part of the Artarmon area, and consider locating any future bulky goods retails and showroom to the Pacific Highway frontage where there's a business zone at the moment. So those areas that I referred to as being in the IN2 areas, and we would suggest through this strategy be increased to a higher FSR of 2 to 1, are those outlined in the hard black line. Those are the IN2 light industrial areas in the Artarmon Industrial Area. The second suite of key directions are, as I reflected before in the presentation, to prohibit new childcare centres in the industrial zone. We have a number of childcare centres existing in the industrial zone, and they would continue to have existing use rights if this should go through the LEP. However, we believe that childcare centres in an industrial area are probably not the best use of the land. We would prefer to see employment generating and technologically supporting uses happening, urban service uses such as waste recycling, all of which are not necessarily appropriate neighbours for childcare centres, which we believe would be better suited to locate elsewhere for the well-being of the children who will be attending them. We'll investigate traffic and car parking management improvements in response to our integrated transport strategy, which is also in draft form still, but we hope will be a final strategy at the end of the year. And review provision of those internal bus services which help employees to get from Chatswood CBD and St Leonards Station to their employment places within the industrial area. There are currently some shuttle bus services that run from parts of the Artarmon industrial area through to the station, but we think this is an important mechanism to deter people, or encourage people, should I say, to use public transport rather than to always drive to their employment. We would like to see some improvement in freight links and networks, and that will be something we'll explore, as I say, through our integrated transport strategy. Support smart infrastructure, the use of new technology and electric vehicle charging stations, and integrate bike racks to support cycling. So to get that active transport more present in our industrial areas as well. Improvement of pedestrian and cycle links and the tree canopy in Artarmon employment area will also help with health and well-being of users of the industrial area and those passing through. And we are indeed currently working on improvements to our cycle links and our pedestrian networks in council. There were some webinars last week, I think, which was talking about improvements to cycle networks throughout the LGA, and the tree canopy to reduce the urban heat impact and improve amenity of those who are using the area or visiting the area. So that slide deck, I hope, has given you a little bit of a flavour of what is contained in our draft industrial land strategy. It's a tester for your thinking and hopefully giving you some ideas and something to respond to or add to. Our public exhibition will be running until the 20th of July. This webinar will be going on the website to view again, should you want to see it once more. And we'll attend to respond to most of the questions today, but if there are questions that are raised later, then we can add those to the website. Following consideration of feedback that we get on this exhibition, we'll report the draft strategy to Council with a view to finalising it before the end of the year, so we can get the content of the industrial land strategy into the work we're doing on the LEP and reviewing the LEP and the DCP both this year, next year, and hopefully have it made the year after, but that's a very tight time frame we've set ourselves. So that is effectively the end of the presentation. I'm now going to turn to some questions that were raised prior to the webinar this afternoon, and maybe provide a bit of an answer for those questions now. So maybe I should stop sharing the screen at this point and come back to you with my my face so you can see me answering the questions. So the first question was sent from Greg Stocks of Dixon Avenue in Artarmon. Now, Greg has been quite supportive of the strategy. He thinks it's a sensible strategy, and it's where we're going, he believes, with the greater density of the area. He has some concerns about the provision of electric vehicle charging stations at public expense, and wonders whether or not this is a sensible path to be taking to provide more EV charging stations throughout the industrial area. So I think I should start by responding that we actually have covered off on electric vehicle charging stations as being something Council is supporting through our Green City Plan, through our LSPS, and through our integrated transport strategy. It's been an innovation to provide more EV charging stations that has been through the Traffic Committee already and explored as part of our integrated transport strategy. So it's been well scrutinised by Council. And really the suggestion here that something that has already been accepted by Council should be extended throughout the industrial area. People who buy electric vehicles apparently now currently pay far more luxury car tax and stamp duty than internal combustion engine vehicles pay in road tax in the whole car's lifetime. So they pay a lot of tax in different ways. And air pollution from motor vehicles, which is something that has been in our mind when we've been settling on the policy for electric vehicles, is something, this air pollution kills over 1,700 Australians every year. So it's equivalent to 60% more deaths than car accidents, if you like, on New South Wales roads. So this is the real cost of the economy. So air pollution is something that costs the state billions of dollars every year in public health. Electric vehicles, on the other hand, produce zero exhaust emissions and are cost-effective and an efficient solution to significantly improving air quality. And so we believe that that's the more holistic view. Electric vehicles have been supported by Council in a number of their strategic documents and strategic decisions. And therefore, this is something that we will continue to suggest be extended throughout the industrial area. And that's something that others may want to comment on. Our second question was from Andrew Bell from Matrix Digital, who asks a site-specific question about a property in Reserve Road in Artarmon, 82 Reserve Road, which has about 17 industrial units on the site, ranging from printers to signage and fabrication and vehicle rentals. And Andrew wonders if we're actually proposing a rezoning of 82 Reserve Road, which is in our IN1 zone. And the answer is very simply no, we're not. As you'll have got from the presentation this afternoon, we are very keen to retain our IN1 and IN2 zone, even with the increase or range of uses being added to on sites. So that underlying zoning will remain as IN1 for 82 Reserve Road. The third question that we took prior to the webinar starting was from Margie Dash. And Margie is a business owner in the area. Margie asked about solving the traffic and parking issues on McLaughlin Avenue, and her fear that, that this is a very dangerous part of the road network in Artarmon, and with trucks, particularly concrete trucks and the recycling trucks from the facility there on McLaughlin Avenue being very in dangerous situations on that road network. And she was worried about the safety of the community. So the use that's on that corner, which is the Bingo Recycling Centre at 10 McLaughlin Avenue, is in fact exactly the sort of use we would expect to see in our Artarmon industrial area. It's an urban service providing recycling, very valuable recycling services for people living in this eastern part of the metropolitan area. So it covers probably services not only the eastern city, but also the lower North Shore generally. The facility was approved in 2015. There was a traffic management plan associated with that. And I know that there's been a series of complaints and questions about how the traffic is actually functioning in response to the use of that site. So it's a very important issue that Margie has raised. We'll be taking that on board, and maybe it's time to revisit how that traffic and parking is operating in that part of the industrial area, because we don't want dangerous situations to occur. We're very concerned that they're not allowed to persist. But indeed, this is the sort of use, nonetheless, traffic and parking aside, that this industrial area is there to provide the location for. Now, I'm looking to see whether or not there may be any other questions. Tanya's been keeping an eye on whether or not the questions have been flowing during the webinar.
Hi everyone, Tanya Stark here. Unbeknownst to Norma, we've been having doing some technical work to try and get the messenger, the chat room up. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that, so we're going to go to plan B, which will be to unmute microphones as we go around. Now, we did try another alternative to try and get the reaction function, but unfortunately the facilitator and co-facilitators can't see that, so we can't even see if somebody's putting their hand up, so to speak, to ask a question. So we'll have to work with, it's probably plan C or D, I think, whilst you were talking.
Right.
So, you did very well to not be distracted by all that going around you, Norma, I must say. So we might start with Councillor Norton. Councillors always have a question. I'll just start and go around the room if that's okay. I'll need to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Wendy.
Yep. I guess my only question would be a little more information about the bulky goods situation, please.
Yes, particularly in Artarmon, we have the bulky goods facility almost in the centre of the industrial area, and that is it functions well. It's well patronised, but it's a use that, being a retail use essentially, although bulky goods, that is probably more appropriate to be located close to other centres rather than an industrial area. So the suggestion is that for the retail purposes should not be the main reason, the main use in an industrial area. Really, it should be a productive and innovative and industrial purpose rather than a retail purpose. But we have benefited from having the existing bulky goods retail outlet there. And there may be a different response in terms of Chatswood East or East Chatswood, where there are other bulky goods retail facilities there. And maybe that's where, in fact, they are allowed at the moment and would continue to be allowed in East Chatswood. But for Artarmon, for today's webinar, we're looking to limit the bulky goods to the area that it currently is.
And we have the authority to do that. It's not something that's imposed upon us by those above?
We have the authority to set the sorts of uses within our LEP that we would entertain in our industrial areas.
Good, thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Norton. I'll just go to Councillor Tuan. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you very much. I was trying to unmute. So thank you, Norma, for your very wonderful presentation. I'm generally in support of the proposals and the fact that the tree canopy is going to be increased and childcare centres probably trying to be minimised. And I think that at this stage, I probably won't be having any further questions, but I'll be waiting for community consultations to see how things go.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Tuan. Yes, as will we.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Seville now. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Hello there, Norma. Can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Yes, I can hear you, Lynn.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's really good to hear. It's a very good overview. One thing that has come up at the Sustainability Reference Committee has been the importance of tree canopy,
Yes.
but also for the potential to use the tops of buildings for renewable energy generation. And I realise most of those buildings are privately owned industrial sites.
Mm.
But I'm just wondering about incentives for that to occur.
I think it's a very interesting and important question, and it's certainly something that we could consider in the strategy. It's something that we'd probably seek to work with our sustainability section in council on. But I think it's a very good idea, because otherwise you have a lot of wasted roof space that could actually be used for.
And I think when you look at any aerial shots of the Artarmon industrial area, they're just open spaces waiting to be used, and a number of us on that on the sustainability committee have already spoken in support of it. So if it could be progressed in some way, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and I'm just going by the names that are up there, so I apologise if I don't have your full names, but I'm going to Ian's iPhone now. I'm just unmuting you if you have any questions. I'll assume not. I'll go to Adrian now.
Sorry, you there?
Oh, Ian, hello.
Yes, the proposal to go to 1,000 square metres for a 2-to-1 FSR in the IN2 zone. It's difficult to get 1,000 square metres in that part of Artarmon, on the eastern side of Herbert Street. A lot of the buildings there are very old and very tired, and I've got a couple of them. Is there any interest in reducing that to something that's a bit more achievable? Because most of the blocks of land around there are probably 500 metres or thereabouts.
Well, we'd invite a submission to that effect, because we're looking to see, we haven't given much in terms of FSR increase or anything of that sort of planning control ilk. So if you wanted to lodge a submission to that effect, we'll examine what that might mean, and that could be something we would certainly look at.
Okay.
Thank you, Ian. I've just sent a message for Adrian, if you'd like to unmute.
Hello?
Hello, Adrian. Did you have a question?
Hi. Yeah, I do. I was just wondering, with regard to the decision to provide health services in the IN2 area that you kind of shaded out in a circle, I was wondering why the decision was made for those services only to be limited to that area and not the wider and perhaps northern end of, as you mentioned, or you briefly touched on during the discussion.
Well, the wider area, we believe, could still provide health support through productive and industrial uses. There's a very wide range of things that can happen in the IN2 and IN1 zones that would still be supporting the health and health precinct, but not, but in an industrial way, if you like, a productive way. What we were being asked to do, and why we've shown that hatching north of the Royal North Shore Hospital, is that we're being asked to consider genuine health facilities, so private hospitals and so on, which are not part of the zone at the moment, so would have to be added to the zone for them to actually occur. And that's where we've tried to be as careful and as reasonable as possible in terms of identifying where best those sites could be. Does that answer your question? Not really.
It does, but not really. I'm just wondering why, like the northern part of Artarmon that kind of abuts the same area, in my thinking, has the same capability of delivering those services. And I just don't understand why that area that's hatched would be the area that's been predetermined by council as only being suitable for those services.
Well, and when you say predetermined, it's the area that we're suggesting is the one we can support. I suppose the most solid decision has been the fact that it's in our local strategic planning statement in that way, saying that this is an area close to the Royal North Shore Hospital. Therefore, you get that connectivity and that synergy between the hospital and the new health uses, rather than having it, set at the other side of the industrial area where you've got to travel through the industrial area to get to the other facility. But it's seen as an efficient and sensible way to grow a precinct where they're actually adjacent to each other in terms of use. So we think it makes logical sense and geographic sense to do it this way, but if you have a different view, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to go to Lisa in a moment, but I just wanted to just pop in and say we'll try to get one question for each of the participants that are still here. But if we run out of time, we'd be happy to take some emails, and I think you would have all received an email address for Norma, and we'll pop those questions and responses in themes, not necessarily word for word, up on our Have You Say project page. So if we don't get time, don't be concerned, we will address those questions and make sure they're available. Lisa, are you available? Did you have a question?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, that's terrific. And David Kazarian, I don't know if I've said that right, I'm just sending you a request to unmute. You there, David? Okay. We'll go to the next one. Good sight. Obviously can see better than I can.
I think that's Councillor Campbell.
Oh, Councillor Campbell.
It's Craig Campbell. Sorry, I lied.
You're bouncing a bit there. You there? Councillor Campbell? We haven't heard anything. I'm sorry. If you could email Ian, if you've got emails, his email address, the question, and we'll continue on if that's okay. I'm sorry, we can't pick you up, so we're running by the hip here. So we'll just try the next one. Who've we got? Claire, we're just sending you a request to unmute if you have a question.
I have no questions, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Georgina Rossack.
Oh, it's Rusak.
Rusak, sorry, thank you.
Happy. No, I guess I don't have any specific questions at this point, but how do we, are you able to send this recorded webinar or the slides to the people who have participated?
Absolutely. We're recording this and it'll be going, we'll put up a link, on to YouTube from Have You Say. So we'll send out an email to all of the participants to let you know when this is updated, if that's okay.
So we'll all get notified. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay,
no
thank you.
At this point, thanks.
Okay, terrific. And I'm just going to Karen. We spoke earlier today. How are you? Do you have a question? Corinne.
Yes, sorry. I just
Hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Do you have a question?
Thank you so much. That was a very nice presentation. As to the FSR, like we have a building that is bigger than that, and I always thought about using the roof solar. So that's, first of all,
that's good.
A really good idea. And an incentive would certainly get some of the owners to contribute maybe as well. But also, would that mean we could possibly raise our floor level then for the whole unit complex and put another level on the top, if that is possible? I don't know whether it can be constructed, but it's a very solid building. And could we also internally use the space different, because they're warehouses, but some of them need more office space these days, because deliveries come in, they're not all workshop, but they're sometimes more technical workshops, so you don't need them. So
there's no reason why the internal changes couldn't be made, providing those uses remain ancillary to the main use of the building at the end.
Yeah, of course,
there's no reason why those internal changes couldn't be made.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. We'll have to put a question in then.
Thanks for that, Karen. And I'll just go to Harren, or Harren. I'm terrible with names.
Hey, yeah, no questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me. We might have lost a few people. It's looked like we might have lost a few people now. I can't see that there's any more on the screen. And there you go. There's actually someone called iPad, if that's your name. I've sent you a request to unmute if you have a question. if you're on an iPad, you may not be able to speak. So I'm just guessing that you may be on an iPad. Okay, just 1 minute. Ian, did we get it? No, we haven't got a question from Councillor Campbell. Okay. By the looks of it, and I'm sorry if we've missed something, but it looks like we don't have any more participants. I don't think we can go back to everybody. But by all means, you've got that email address there for Norma Shunke-Williams. Please send any questions you may have that haven't been addressed in this forum, and I'll hand back to Norma now.
Thanks, Tanya. That's great. And thank you for all those questions and the input from the councillors. That's been very beneficial. I hope that this has been a useful session, and I do encourage you to make a submission on the draft strategy. As I say, this has been the first of 2 webinars. Next week, we'll be talking about East Chatswood and Lane Cove North. So I'd encourage you to join us again if you would like to have see what we're proposing for those areas. And thank you today for your attention and the time spent listening to the presentation. Thank you very much again, and I'll close the webinar.